Hey guys, and I'm really excited to welcome Casimir Ward to the podcast today. So, Cas, maybe introduce yourself and kind of tell everybody basically what it is that you do.
Thanks again for having me, Danny. What I spend a lot of my time doing is I work as a chief financial officer for numerous companies. You hear the term fractional CFO. That's what I do. Most companies that are anywhere between a million, even all the way up to $50 million in revenue, they don't need to spend the money on a full-time CFO. So I go and I work with the C-suite or the leadership team, can play that finance accounting leadership role with them to help them build their company.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, my whole background is accounting. I've owned a few businesses. I continue to own an engineering company, and it's the role that I've kind of just been in for the last 20 years.
And you just wrote a book, right? I have, for those who are watching on video, I've actually got it up in the corner up here. But for those who are watching the audio or listening to the audio, what's the book about? And just tell us about that real quick.
Well, I do accounting, and the main reason I do accounting is most people hate accounting. And to be quite honest, I probably am right up there with them, but I pretty much have figured out that the problem with accounting is not doing accounting, it's understanding. So I wrote the book, How Much Does It Cost to Make a Donut? And Other Questions That Make Us Hate Accounting. And it's a real simple overview of about 6 or 7 accounting concepts that every, not just business owner, but manager, leader, whether they're in a large corporation or even a small company, what they need to understand accounting wise in order to make decisions, not to do accounting, just to make decisions. And it's reinforced with a story of a donut shop that I owned and operated with a partner years ago. And every concept's reinforced with 20 individual entrepreneurial stories from all types of businesses.
That's great. Well, I'm about halfway through it, and as someone who does not like accounting and does not like numbers, I really appreciate your approach. It's really great. But
Thank
pivoting
you.
to kind of the subject of the day here, Cass. So, coronavirus is a thing. We're 2 weeks in or so. A lot of businesses are hurting in terms of revenue. I have some clients whose cash flow is down like 90%, and
Yeah.
this is kind of a wild situation. So for you, as somebody who works with a lot of businesses and has a lot of perspective, kind of where do you start processing this through for a business owner?
Well, for the business owner, the hard part is right off the bat is you're already in that silo. So if I own, let's just say, a travel agency at this point, that's my silo right now. So the perspective I get right now is I deal with a lot of different industries right now. So the companies I serve are still the engineering company, a digital media service company, a couple construction companies, an orthodontist company. I mean, and about 3 others in between, but the industries are all over the place. I'll be honest, I go into some of these companies and within 2 days, they were talking about the employees they needed to cut and what they needed to do to save money. At the same time, it's been a week and I go and I talk to the engineering and construction companies and they're like, what's to worry about? Everything's fine. Nothing's changed. They really haven't seen any change or impact on their business. And then in between that, there's a varying difference of impact. But the one thing I think I adjust or I deal with the most right now is how people are reacting to it. I am Chicken Little. I am afraid of my shadow. I am afraid that everything is going to go away overnight. And trying to calm myself down in my own world is causing it to look in perspective. I've got a whole spectrum of everything and impact that's happening to other companies. It's not horrible. For some companies and industries, it is much horrible. But what I found is some of the companies that have not even suffered the impact yet, they're already making drastic decisions that are actually doing more harm to their business than the actual pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, it's hard when in the short term, because I'm in the same place as you where I work with businesses in a number of different industries. And so the impact is very different depending on what industry they're in. But, it's tough for any business when they see their revenue, cut, drop significantly and cash flow drop significantly in the short term. And, one of the things that I kind of encourage people to think through before they make rash decisions and cut things that they may regret down the road is kind of like the difference between, cutting expenses and cutting investments. So one of the conversations I have with many of my clients is, now is actually in most cases not the time to completely stop marketing. It might be time to pivot your marketing, and maybe you're trying to accomplish different things right now. But whether it's laying people off or, stopping your marketing and so you fall behind in that way, or, kind of pulling back on, key parts of your business that you've spent time building, I'm with you. I think that can do more harm than good. So do you have any sort of advice for people that are just sitting there kind of weighing that out and just trying to decide, like, do I need to just cut everything right now versus, am I, like, how do you process that?
So really, let's start with the cliche. You've got to peel the onion first. What makes you nervous, and what are you afraid of? I'm afraid my business is going to go under and I'm not going to have it tomorrow. Fair enough. Even in good times, sometimes entrepreneurs have that feeling. But really, people start reacting. I have one client that was going to start decreasing their production team. I was like, oh, okay, well, that should be a really good cost savings. How much work have you lost? None. Oh, well, how are you going to fulfill those orders? I don't know, but I've got to cut costs, was the response. Well, the cost that he was going to cut would eliminate, 4 to 5 times the amount of revenue he could bring in by completing that work. So what I've started doing with a lot of the companies I work with is I try to find out, what is it that really makes you nervous? So of course, cash flow is a great example. Amongst the 9 to 10 companies I'm working with right now, it varies. Some have not seen a change. All of their bills are getting paid. Some are seeing some of their customers go out of business. So cash may or may not be the metric you use to decide whether or not to react. So I've started working with different companies and figuring out what that metric is. And in one company, we've decided, you know what? Revenue's still coming in on a weekly basis. We're billing out. Collections we've never worried about with our customers, but if our rolling balance for our revenue over 3 to 4 weeks ever does not equal, and I'm just going to say $250,000, if we're not having that on a rolling 4-week basis that we look at every single week, we start making cuts. If our receivables continue to grow, we make those cuts. Start finding out what those things are. Sometimes it's a cash balance. And what's funny is I work with a lot of great owners, and they want to take care of their employees. We're going to do everything we can to not lay anybody off. And I sat in 2 meetings this weekend with 2 different companies, and they said, okay, I've got $300,000 in the bank, $500,000 in receivables, and another $200,000 in savings. Got $1 million right now based on all of those assets. Our monthly cash burn is $200,000 a month. And if we have 0 revenue in, we've got enough to finance the company for 5 months. Sounds great. If nobody gets laid off, but what's left after 5 months? They've achieved their goal, and they have 0 money in the bank. They have exhausted everything. Now everybody goes. So now it's starting to come up with a plan with, like, let's look at the resources, but how can we make that last as long as it is?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that $200,000 cash burn needs to turn into 150. And maybe perhaps we need to still have our revenue goals set at a certain place.
Right.
But people are putting everything in one bucket. All my sales are gone. All my cash is gone. Everything is gone. If all of everything is gone right off the bat, then you have a serious issue. And I don't want to be flippant about it, because there are companies that are having just that.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Cass. I think that's a really good way to think about it. It's kind of a conversation about how do you extend the runway, right? So it's not question for you. So this is a conversation that's come up with some of my clients a few different times. So the SBA is pushing out disaster, loans, and I think the rate is like 3.75%. And so kind of my position, I'm curious if you've seen any differently, is like right now there's no downside to going into the application process and, trying to get approved.
Yep.
To me, and I'm not a finance guy, but to me, that is very cheap money. And it's at least a good idea to go through the approval process so that you have access to it should you need it down the road. But do you see it any differently?
No, I see it exactly as you are, but what I'm not seeing is the change of any parameters. So having been a part of several startups, in order to get those SBA loans, you have to have a pretty good amount of assets and business built up to leverage against, or sign that personal guarantee. So the loan really isn't, generally speaking, SBA loans aren't that much different than bank loans. There are some extra caveats and things that will help business owners, but I don't know what difference these emergency loans are going to be, because I have people that didn't apply for SBA loans reaching out to me years ago when there wasn't a disaster that think, well, now that they're available to everybody, I'm sure the restrictions are going down. I have yet to see anything that confirms nor denies that that's the case. If it's the same application, if you were not eligible before, you may not be eligible for them now. Again, I haven't looked through all the details. I've spent a lot of time preparing financial statements so they can be submitted for those SBA loans. And really, everybody that owns a small business is applying for these loans right now. I can't even think or imagine how the loan review process is going to be. I mean, thinking of it as a physical location, how long is the line into the bank, the SBA?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. And even if they do process it, it's not going to be a short-term solution. I think, Congress, I think, is still trying to figure out the details of who is and who isn't going to be eligible and all of that. But no, that's helpful. So Cass, kind of as we wind down here, any just last big picture pieces of advice for business owners that are just sitting here, just trying to figure out how they should be processing all of this and how they should be planning for, the next few weeks as we hopefully come out of this shutdown and hopefully resume some sense of normalcy, but we don't really know yet.
Well, it's hard because everything is very reactionary right now. And in great business times, we tell people to prepare, to be proactive and not reactive. Right now, it's so easy to go into panic mode. And really, it's not that reacting is bad, but we start throwing everything up against the wall to see what will stick. And it creates more uncertainty. Honestly, now that a week's going, some of the clients I work with that have been kind of the most stressed about it are like, there's really nothing I can do about it. These are the three things I can control right now. Focus on those. Figure out some of those things. And I will tell you, you see this all over social media, how people are getting stir crazy and bored. This is the one time, especially if you're managing, owning a business in any part of the corporation, that you should not be bored. There are definitely things that should have been done for years that could improve your operations. That is now the time to do it, whether it's creating Google Docs to better document your processes, if it's coming up with different social media accounts. I mean, the project list, it is now time to knock those things out.
Right. That's the conversation I'm having too with people who, for years, they can't find the time to get to their marketing. And so their website never gets reviewed and their marketing plan never gets updated. It's like, guess what? You got the time right now. And so no excuses. No, Cass, this was super helpful. I really appreciate you coming on. Tell us, how is your book available now or when does it release? What's going on with that?
Well, it was just released yesterday. We actually, how do we deal with this? It was scheduled to be released April 14th with a couple books signings, a launch party, and all of those have been canceled. So I decided to go ahead and release it early. It came out yesterday. It's available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com, and Lulu.com. You can find more at my website, CasmerWard.com. And from there, I also have been sharing several of the interviews I've done with entrepreneurs that are used in classrooms for case studies on that website as well.
That's great. Cass, tell us just the Entrepreneur Series. Just real quick, give us the synopsis of that and how people can find that, because I personally watched a number of those interviews, and it's some of the best content I've seen recently, and I'm really not using that flippantly. Like I really think it's great stuff. So tell us just a little bit about that whole series.
So I have been teaching entrepreneurship at Queen's University for the past 8 years, and I moved my class online a year and a half ago, and really taking the lectures out, the textbook and all the materials in the class, when I went online and was transferring that material, the one thing that I was nervous about was, how do I get, when I bring in an entrepreneur like Danny to come in and tell his story in front of those students? Danny, you're a business owner. You've bought, sold, started new companies left and right. Hearing the mistakes, hearing those successes, those are some of the best case studies available. So I figured, how do I develop that online? Well, I developed a series of interviews with entrepreneurs all the way from startup companies to Fortune 500 companies, with minority-owned businesses, nonprofit, every type of business being represented as an interview and business case. And after I taught the class, I figured, you know what? This really isn't my content. This is everybody's content. So I made it available for everybody. So again, you can find those on the video series on my website, casmerward.com, or go to influencingentrepreneurs.com.
Awesome. Well, Cass, thanks so much for kind of everything you're doing, and thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Danny.